Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Bentley with Invite Education, and I'd like to welcome you to the webinar today on reducing stress and finding success with your college plan. I'm joined by Cheryl Hogel from HarborLight Credit Union, and I'll let Cheryl introduce herself, and we'll go over some housekeeping rules before the webinar begins.
Great. Well, I'm Cheryl Hogel with HarborLight Credit Union. I'm Director of Financial Education there. I've worked at the credit union for 23 years, and I work with all the youth programs. And I met Jeff this summer at a conference and actually won a seminar, and we kind of fine-tuned this for you, trying to help with the stress of college planning.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cheryl. So a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions during this presentation, feel free to use the chat function. Type your questions into the chat and we will do our best to answer them during this presentation. This will also be recorded, so it can be shared. We will be providing a recording to HarborLight Credit Union to post on their website so folks can watch it on their own time. This webinar should run approximately about a half hour, 20 minutes to a half hour, depending on questions. So knowing that going in, we won't take up too much of your time, but we'll try to give you as much information as possible. So starting off, so this webinar is designed for parents of freshmen just completing their first semester to seniors selecting colleges, really for parents and students. This half hour will focus on what you and your student is next for you in this process. So from entering, for those have entering freshman year, currently in 10th, 11th, or 12th grade, we will walk you through the process of preparing for college. So let's dive into freshman year. For the student, freshman year counts. It really does. You're just getting acclimated to high school, but this starts you on the path to college success by first identifying your natural interests and skills. Whether they're new or existing, your freshmen are trying to find their independence at this point, but with that independence comes new responsibilities. That leads into the academics, where students are picking courses that are appropriately challenging. The temptation might be to say, I'm going to pick all honors courses freshman year. Everything I'm going to take is AP and honors. I think colleges it's far better to show progression than loading up early on a ton of honors courses. So the idea is to pick ones that are appropriately challenging, but also don't overwhelm yourself right out of the gate. Another thing we like to talk about is it's great study routines. So setting up routines, whether it's a certain location, whether it's a time of day, ideally what works for you as a student will define the next 3 or 4 years as to what study habits you cling to. Extracurricular activities. Depth over breadth is really what it comes down to. You can start exploring freshman year many different extracurricular activities, but we'll note that colleges will tend to look at those who are focused on not many, so less than 5, 1 or 2 ideally, and those activities that you're heavily engaged into. So really getting back to depth over breadth when it comes to extracurricular activities. On the parent side, so we're not leaving you out of this as well. So if you have not done so yet, please open a college savings account. It's never too late. Our motto here at Invite Education is saving $1 today is better than borrowing one tomorrow. So even if you are in your high school years, it doesn't hurt to open up some type of college savings account. There's a lot of tax benefits, education credit benefits related to that. So if you are saving in a regular savings vehicle, I encourage you to look into a college savings account and reap the benefits of that. Encourage conversations about the career and the value of college. So this is something where you don't want to overwhelm them, but tell your students, okay, what are your thoughts after high school? Are you pursuing a career? Are you pursuing a trade school? Have you thought about a college or what type of college you may be interested in? So getting them to start thinking about that is good. But again, if it's becoming an overwhelming discussion, feel free to back off and revisit it at a later date. And then support activities in the classroom and extracurricular pursuits. So again, getting back to what the students are doing and having that independence to pick courses that are challenging, picking extracurricular activities that they really want to be interested in, supporting that on behalf of your students. Again, they're finding themselves at this point and you as a parent can do everything you can to support that during that freshman year. 10th grade, sophomore year. So now you really want to establish a strong record of academic and extracurricular performance as a sophomore. Again, really now focusing, whereas freshman year, as I said, you may have dabbled into many different activities. Truly focus on some extracurriculars that you really can show a role in. And then getting the academic classes that are appropriate. So they need to be appropriate at the time that you're in school. Again, we want to show progression. So again, not loading up early on, but showing progression that you're taking harder and harder courses as high school goes along. Start lining up leadership opportunities for junior and senior year. So in some of these clubs that you may be in or these extracurriculars, start maybe looking into potentially doing leadership roles within those organizations in school. But also look at out of school as well. I mean, colleges do look at folks who lead a group of peers to complete a project, let's say, outside of the classroom. So those are things that a student can really take advantage of in seeking leadership opportunity. It's a very important aspect in the college admissions process. And then start a broad list. Again, if the student is ready, sophomore year, if they are starting to look, they may want to start thinking, okay, do I like a small school? Do I like a medium school? Do I want one in the city? Do I want one that's more rural? They can start doing a preliminary, they can decide that I never want to live in a city. So start checking off schools that are in cities. So these are things that can be broached during the sophomore year. For parents, the fun part about the cost of college and paying for it, these discussions are never fun, but these are important. And one of the takeaways I would love for you to take away from this particular seminar is that college should be really a business decision in a lot of ways, and not treated as an emotional one. The student will definitely have some input as to a good college fit, so on and so forth, but there has to be a practical discussion on the cost of college and how this is going to be paid for. Obviously, you hear student debts in the news, you hear the cost of college is high, but families can do their part to mitigate those things. Understand expected family contribution as it relates to financial aid. So expected family contribution is basically the expected family contribution is the number that when you fill out the FAFSA, so it's the free application for federal student aid that families fill out senior year to qualify themselves for federal student aid. The expected family contribution is the number that basically spits back out at you when you fill that in FAFSA out. That says this is what we as the government assume that you can pay as a family for the cost of college. That number gets turned in. Every college looks at that, and then they provide a financial aid award letter as a result. So things that you can do sophomore year. When you apply for aid senior year, what happens is that colleges, the federal formula looks back 2 years of your income. So the meaning 2 years prior. So for students that are applying for the academic year 2019-20, they're looking at your 2017 tax information. So what we want to do is basically mitigate some of that potentially, like student assets. Let's say a student has done a great job in basically saving a lot of money for college. Student assets are factored in at a much higher rate than parent assets. So for instance, a 529 program. A 529 program is considered a parent asset. And that means that that is looked at a much lower percentage, 5.64%, lower than a student assets, which are looked at around 20%. So these are things that you may want to consider around that time, around the sophomore year, to make sure that maybe the student doesn't have a ton of assets in their name, knowing that year will be looked at for the financial aid formula when they apply to school. Another thing we will, like parents, do is support those challenging activities. So if the students do want to challenge themselves in the classroom and outside the classroom, that you support them on that end. And again, they may be trying something new that you may not agree with, and maybe it's okay to agree to disagree. But your student, again, is finding that independence, and they're potentially looking for something that might be different from what you think, but definitely support those activities on the student end. Junior year, standardized exams. Always fun. SATs, ACTs. A number of students, if the area offers them, take both, uh, which is not a bad thing. Some take tests better for an SAT or vice versa with the ACT. Um, Also, if they're looking at particular schools, some our schools are test optional. Let's say students aren't good test takers. That's okay. There are a number of schools out there now that are test optional, that require a college essay in place of a standardized test. So again, that is okay. There's many different options. More and more schools these days aren't weighing the test scores as heavily, but they are still a factor out there. So junior year is a time when you want to start taking these. Generally, 2 to 3 times tops, I think, would be the ideal, to take those exams. Now start assembling a preliminary college lists, and maybe looking to visit some schools now while on break. So if there's a spring break, if there's a summer break, start taking a visit at some of these schools. Really do your college homework. There's really 3 fits when you look at for a college, and that's the academic fit, the social fit, and the financial fit. So really factor in all 3 when you're assembling your preliminary college list. Again, they're narrowing down to maybe you don't like a city and you don't like rural. You want something in between, like a college town. Okay, well, that's something you can start narrowing down. Understanding the college application and financial aid process is very, 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 very important. You'll hear things thrown around like early decision, early action, rolling admissions, regular decision. Familiarize yourself with all these terms and what they mean as far as deadlines, and the processes associated with it. So if you're applying early decision, most schools have a deadline of November 1st, which means you have to have your financial aid in by that point too, if you want to see what award letter you might be getting and financial aid package you might be getting from that particular school. And again, this is where the student should really start taking ownership of the process and understand the expectations. Not to say the parents can't help with this, but the student is the one going to school, and the more that they understand those application and financial aid processes, the better. So for parents, have this realistic discussion about how to pay for it. One of the big issues, of course, is will that student take on student debt? I know parents who said my students will not take on student loans. I will do everything I can to not have that happen. I'm of the personal belief that that's okay. Student loans offer a little skin in the game when it comes to their education, and it's a relatively low-cost way to establish good credit after graduation. So once a student leaves school, by paying student loans or having a low-cost student loan program, we say that basically if you leave school with an average amount of debt that's less than your starting salary, that's okay. The average federal student debt is around $27,000-$30,000. That's not a bad thing. So if the student can manage that amount of debt and have some skin in the game when it comes to paying for college, we think that's better all around. Managing expectations. So really the foundation of the college application has been laid, really the sophomore and junior year. So everything they've done academic wise has been there. So don't have them be stressed out about it. Everything will be okay. They're going to do, hopefully do well enough in school where it won't be that big of a deal. So just really have an open and honest dialogue with your student about those expectations. And then, finally, of course, support, encourage your student to dream, pursue goals, and achieve. Again, whatever it may be, have them shine. That's really what it's all about. For senior year, just some check the box items. Again, take or retake standardized exams, usually in the fall. If you've taken early decision, early action, you want to get those done junior year. But if you're on a regular decision or rolling admissions, you can take those fall of senior year, no problem. Again, we try to say no more than 2 to 3 times because then it just starts to get diluted. And I don't think you're going to do that much better after taking it 2 or 3 more times on an exam. Now you're starting to finalize the college list. So we have this reach, target, and safety. Most of you probably heard different variations along those lines, where a reach is obviously someone, maybe it's academically out of their range, financially out of their range, let's say. So these are the reach schools that the student really wants to go to. A target one where based on all the criteria, it looks like it's a likely fit for the student. And then safety, meaning that it's a school that maybe they don't ideally would love to attend, but likely would get into. But really the important caveat is that you should be willing to go to all 3. So any of those schools on that list, really the student should be willing to attend any or all of those particular institutions. And again, finding a school in the safety, that's not a bad thing. We just want to make sure that there is a broad spectrum, so they're not putting all their eggs in one basket and all the reach basket, realizing that they may not get in, and then they become discouraged. So just really just look beyond what it needs to be a reach safety, a reach and a target, and don't discount safety schools. So applying for and selecting colleges based on acceptances and wait lists. So basically, once you're applying for those schools and then selecting them, you will get accepted to some, rejected to some, waitlisted for others. Waitlist isn't necessarily a bad thing, but know your expectations around that. So basically, have a plan around deadlines, have a plan about when you're going to, if you really want to go to this particular school, what that's going to take to get into as far as the acceptance. And then starting the financial aid process. Again, having the student involved in this discussion is, I just think, sorely needed. I think that students should be more involved in the process of paying for it, as opposed to saying, oh, mom and dad are going to take care of it. They really should know what it's going to go into paying for this education, whether it's scholarships, institutional grants that the school is giving you, free money. Evidently, you want to maximize the free money. What loans, if any, you will be taking, who will be taking those loans, parents, students, so on and so forth. As a parent here in senior year, just have them help the students keep track of deadlines. Very, very important. Whether it's admissions deadlines, as I mentioned, like November 1 for early decision for a lot of schools, or your financial aid deadlines, which tend to be in March through May. A lot of those are focused on grant eligibility. Let's say state grant eligibility. Some states say, okay, May 1st, you have to have everything in, or you will not be awarded a grant. So those financial aid deadlines and getting the information that the financial aid office needs to process your financial aid award letter to show the money that you can get is very, very important. This is another big one as well. The second point is not to eliminate schools due to sticker price. Really wait for financial aid to determine the true cost. One of the best practices we like to say is look outside your footprint. So, as if you're looking at schools in Michigan, that's great, but there are also many options outside of your area. Looking at a school that's outside a particular footprint, they may be looking for your type of student. They may be looking for a female from the Midwest that plays the tuba, for instance, and a school will give a lot of money to have that student join their school. Basically, when colleges put together their class, they put together a diverse class, and diversity includes geographic diversity. And so they don't want to build a school with all the same amount of people and from the same area. They do want to build a geographical diversity. So looking outside the footprint of, let's say, Michigan or the upper Midwest, you may be able to find a school that's willing to pay a lot more for your student to go to because of that. So when you see the sticker price is there because there are some students and some families that can and will pay that, particularly in the international market. So the reason why colleges put that number out there is because there are families willing to pay that. So why wouldn't they do it? But the vast majority of students do not pay that sticker price, and in fact pay far, far less due to the financial aid and the awarded aid that the schools give those particular students and families. And then here, determine college financing. Maybe come up with a better word, but really it's multiple ways to pay for college. So not focusing on one as more important or the other. So it's not all about savings. It's not all about we're going to borrow everything to pay. Look at different avenues. So obviously maximize your free money that the school and the federal government will give you to pay, or outside scholarships as well. If you can have your student apply for outside private scholarships locally and nationally, any free money you can get to offset the cost of college is ideal. Looking at loans, but again, borrowing wisely. Obviously, hopefully there is a savings vehicle up to this point, whether it's yourself or relatives that are doing it as the parent. And then payment plans is something that don't discount either. So I think it's an underutilized tool in the college process is payment plans. Most schools offer one where they allow you to pay a certain amount, let's say $5,000 over a year period. So they'll pay a monthly breaking those out over a 10-month period to pay over the academic year. So it's financing it through different vehicles to help pay for college. So some takeaways here. Breathe, really, breathe. The college process is daunting, but as you see, proper planning, we really have 4 years to go through this. starting with freshmen, it can really help you alleviate the stress for both you and your student. There is obviously people who turn around late junior year and say, "Oh, what are we going to do?" But with proper planning, that definitely reduces the stress and obviously helps you find success in this. Again, reiterating that, make sure the student owns the process. That they're showing independence in high school. Push them on that and make sure that they are part of every step of the way, whether they're choosing colleges that are, again, the good academic fit for them. It's not about the college you get into, it's about the college you complete from. And that's very, very important. I know most school districts publish the list of the schools that everybody got into, and everybody pats them on the back, and that's great. But talk to them later, 4 years later, when those students have graduated. That's the most important piece, is going to those schools, finding the right fit for them that are actually going to complete their education and graduate with a degree. Encourage challenging classwork. Again, the robust community involvement. Don't let them sit in their duff playing video games all day. Getting them out there, getting them good in the classroom, and then finding some good extracurricular activities that they can be involved with, whether it's sports, drama, arts, music, whatever it may be. A leadership club. There's many, many extracurriculars at schools, and they have them definitely take advantage of that to round out their resume, so to speak, and their student profile. And then use the resources that are available to you. So, Cheryl here at the HarborLight Financial Education Department, she can answer questions around this process on some level. And there is a partner that HarborLight uses, Student Choice. They're a student lending partner, and they do offer some good financial education around the financial aid process as well. So feel free to utilize those resources. So we're ready to have any questions, if anybody has any.
Yeah, Jeff, we got a question here. They're just wondering about general advice on what to look out for on student lending.
Sure, absolutely. So there's different student lending options, as you know. So the federal program, the direct loan program, are student-based programs. So basically, when you get your financial aid award letter, all freshman students approved, regardless of how much aid your EFC is or how much the school thinks you can pay, will qualify for a federal student loan if you so choose. Freshman year, those loan amounts are $5,500. Junior year, that goes up to sophomore year, that goes up to $6,500, and then third and fourth year are $7,500. So those are the maximum borrowing amounts for the direct loan program for the students, and that requires a promissory note. And again, all students are eligible to take that. Now, beyond that, there probably is likely a gap, and two of those options are a parent loan, meaning that it's called the PLUS loan, PLUS, which is the parent loan for undergraduate students. It's an acronym, but is a loan in the parent's name. And I would just caution. Some schools would automatically award this loan to close the gap, but it is a credit-based loan, albeit an easy one to get, and it is not a it's one of those ones you just definitely have to take a look at. It's not for everyone. The fees are a little bit high. The interest rate is pretty high. And again, it's in the parent name and not the student name. So there are other choices like a private student loan, and that is our recommendation usually to fill the gap besides a PLUS loan. If you can swing it. Basically, you get better. If you have decent credit, a private student loan is a much better option. And definitely look for one with what's called a cosigner release, which allows you as a parent to co-sign on that student loan. But let's say the student pays back 2 years of on-time payments, you are then released from that loan, and then it becomes a student asset only, which is good because the horror stories out there now of parents being docked Social Security and so on and so forth because they took on too much debt for their students' education.
Thank you, Jeff. And we have another question. What would you tell a junior who is fully aware their single parent won't be able to pay for their college at all?
Well, I'd say that you have options, and that is meaning. I guess the question is how to pay, so to speak. I mean, there's paying, there's financing, there are options, and unfortunately, borrowing can be one of them. But again, smart borrowing is it, and I would encourage the student to look for outside help, look for free money, and to maximize that free money is ideal. So whether it's applying for as many $500, $250 local scholarships, or then looking at national databases. There's plenty of databases out there. I would say if you're looking at some national databases for some scholarships, try not to pay for them. And then secondly, create a new email address for those, because you will be inundated with spam because they do sell your email address. That's, there's no such thing as a free lunch on those scholarship shirts on that. But I would say definitely maximize the amount of free money, and as make the junior, if they're aware of it, still don't be discouraged, because as I mentioned before, there is a school out there for your junior. So don't be scared of the process. As I mentioned, the student could have a great story, great academic record, and they could be a wanted student outside of their footprint in a school outside the area. There's also the community college route. And that a lot of students are very successful that way. A very low cost option to start off your college career is to go to community college for 2 years and then transfer into an existing school, whether it's a private school or a state school. It's a very, very economical way to complete a college education. Because really, again, it's not where you start, it's where you end up.
That's a great point, Jeff. Looks like we have a follow-up question here. If you have been incapable of doing sports and have no extracurriculars, what's the likelihood of receiving a scholarship? I've done a lot of community service, and despite not being in extracurriculars, there might be some opportunities there.
Yeah, I mean, scholarships want to know your story. When you apply for scholarships and you tell them about yourself, there could be a reason you haven't done sports and extracurriculars. Maybe you've been working to support the family. I mean, these are important things when you're true to yourself and true to what you're writing about as far as a scholarship application is concerned. That's what those organizations look for. And there's a number of out there that go unclaimed as well. So, definitely do your research. And I'm not going to lie, it's a lot of work. Writing for scholarships and applying for scholarships is a lot of mind-numbing work. It's writing essays, it's writing stuff. But again, the more free money you get, I know a former colleague who at a prior company of mine who funded her entire college career from community college through undergraduate all the way through graduate school with scholarships. And like I said, it can be done. It's a lot of hard work, but it can be done.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. That concludes our questions.
Okay. Excellent. Cheryl, any final words?
Just a couple things I was thinking based on what you said, Jeff, is just having that realistic discussion between the parent and the students. That's one thing. A number of teachers have told me that their students think that their college way will be all covered by a parent or the parent taking care of it. And they really just need to sit down and have those discussions together and do that. So they be a team on the discussion, and then the student needs to take ownership of it, from there. But they need to sit down and say, okay, what's happening? How will we do this? Is just something that I noted. And that emotional aspect of making a decision of where to go to school or trade school. Try and leave the emotion out a little bit. I mean, it's part of it, but not make it the forefront of your decision making. Think practicality on finances and things like that. Community service, based on that last question, I know goes a long way with a lot of colleges. So if you are involved in community service, volunteer work, that is one aspect that will help with scholarships and getting grants for something like that. So that was just pretty much what I, could add to the conversation there.
Agreed, and I can't reiterate enough the emotional piece of it. I equate it to you wouldn't send your son or daughter down to the local car dealership and say, pick out the most expensive car in the lot and we'll figure out how to pay for it later. That's just not how it works. And colleges are the same way. And it does become an emotional decision as to the fit and what cool gym they have and how's the meal plan and what's the frat life like or fraternity sorority life like. And so there is a lot of that is baked into that emotionally, but colleges are a business when it comes down to the end of the day. Yes, they're a nonprofit. Yes, they're an academic institution, but at the end of the day, they are a business, and their business is to get as many students as they can without giving away the least amount of money out of their own coffers to do so.
And especially if the student is not clear on what major they want to do or what career they want to choose, sometimes the best route is community college and get those basic classes done with at a more inexpensive level, and not taking out, loans for that, but getting that done first, and then maybe getting a little bit more of an idea on what direction you want to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, you couldn't have said it any better myself. So, if there's no other questions, on behalf of Cheryl at HarborLight Credit Union, this is Jeff Bentley with Invite Education, thanking you for joining us for this webinar. And again, feel free to reach out to Cheryl and her team at the Financial Education Office at HarborLight if you have any further questions.
Great. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.